Good morning. All right, we're going to go backwards to go forward. This continues chapter, what did I say? 8. So this will be 8.2. Walker's appeal spread a wide net, excoriating whites and indeed Christian America for its inhumanity and hypocrisy over the long sweep of immutable racial history. Walker traces two essences. On one side lies black history, beginning with ancient Egyptians, Africans, or colored people such as we are, and encompassing our brethren, the Haitians. On the other lie white people, cradled in bloody, deceitful, ancient Greece. Racial traits within these opposites never change. And then here's some stuff that was written by Walker in the Walker's appeal. The whites have always been an unjust, jealous, unmerciful, avaricious, and bloodthirsty set of beings, always seeking after power and authority. We view them all over the Confederacy of Greece, where they were first known to be anything. In consequence of education, we see them there, cutting each other's throats, trying to subject each other to wretchedness and misery, to effect which they used all kinds of deceitful, unfair, and unmerciful means. We view them next in Rome, where the spirit of tyranny and deceit raged still higher. We view them in Gaul, Spain, and Britain. In fine, we view them all over Europe. Together with what were scattered about in Asia and Africa as heathens, and we see them acting more like devils than accountable men. All right, here's a little note after that reading. It says, after the Civil War, one of Emerson's African-American contemporaries in letters, William Wells Brown, born in 1814, in The Rising Sun, or The Antecedents and Achievements of the Colored Race, from 1874, described early Northern Europeans in terms reminiscent of those of both Herodotus and David Walker. Quote, see them in the gloomy forest of Germany, sacrificing to their grim and gory idols, drinking the warm blood of their prisoners, quaffing liberations from human skulls, infesting the shores of the Baltic for plunder and robbery, bringing home the reeking scalps of enemies as an offering to their king. All right, that's the end of that side note. I can see the line in the sky. I feel like I'm off a little, but no more than normal. Okay, murder, Walker concludes, remains the central feature of whiteness, though a sliver of hope for their future might reside in the American heritage of freedom. He ends by quoting the Declaration of Independence, which he exempts from white America's wickedness. The English, for instance, had surmounted their history, turned their backs on slaving, and offered black people the hand of friendship. Once the English stopped oppressing the Irish, Walker opines, their regeneration would be complete. At bottom, David Walker's appeal speaks to white Christians, blaming, ridiculing, and threatening them with destruction in retribution for their mistreatment of blacks. Given white people's moral and behavioral weaknesses, he wonders coyly just which is the inferior race. And here's some of his quote. I, therefore, in the name and fear of the Lord and God of heaven and of earth, divested of prejudice either on the side of my color or that of the whites, advance my suspicion of them, whether they are as good by nature as we are or not. This is not to say that Walker was ready to boast about the slaves. As for black people, and now we continue the quote, we, colored people of these United States of America, are the most wretched, degraded, and abject set of beings that ever lived since the world began. He aimed pointed criticism at free Northern blacks. Some of them can write a good hand, but who, notwithstanding their neat writing, may be almost as ignorant in comparison as a horse. Walker discerns a mean, servile spirit among the people he calls my color. Only when black people organize and throw off the oppressor's yoke will they arise from this death-like apathy and be men. Walker's appeal testified to its author's immersion in the classics of American and European culture, as well as to the familiarity with current politics affecting the Irish, Jews, and Greeks. He strongly indicates white American hypocrisy as exhibited by the Declaration of Independence and the work of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson had died in 1826, but Walker, like Samuel Stanhope Smith, felt that the insults from an American of Jefferson's stature demanded a response. How could Jefferson, a man of enormous learning and excellent natural parts, stoop to judge a set of men in chains? Jefferson may have believed that black people wanted to be white, but in this he is dreadfully deceived. We wish to be just as it pleased our Creator to have made us. An effective promoter, Walker spread his appeal widely, even via black and white sailors, into the slaveholding South, where it made its author well known and much hated. The incendiary pamphlet, addressed directly to African Americans, so alarmed Virginia's upper classes that discussion of it took place in a closed-door session of the General Assembly. In New Bern and Wilmington, North Carolina, any black readers associated with Walker's appeal paid with their lives. In 1830, at only 45 years of age, Walker died of tuberculosis. That scourge of the 19th century urban poor had only days before taken his daughter. A few months earlier, he had issued what became, by default, the final edition of Walker's appeal. Now, Boston's Maria Stuart, the first American woman to publicly address promiscuous audiences, which means audiences including women as well as men. Oh, is that what promiscuous means? I disagree. Well, I do declare address promiscuous audiences, which all that means is audiences that include men as well as women. What? I'm gonna have to admit I didn't actually look that word up, but my lord. Huh. All right, hang on just a second. Let's pause with Crystal for just a minute. Promiscuous. Promiscuous. Huh. Okay, hang on, let me get a drink. My brain stops reeling for a second. neither here nor there, but many, many years ago, me and another educated individual had a disagreement over that word. Okay, it just means audiences, including women as well as men. All right, now we continue on. They eulogized Walker as most noble, fearless, and undaunted. In the Revolutionary year of 1848, the Reverend Henry Highland Garnet lauded Walker as a tireless fighter for freedom. Walker's activism, Garnet concludes, made his memory sacred. Walker's memory remained vivid among abolitionists well into the mid-19th century, only to fade after the Civil War. But meanwhile, he had struck a strong blow against the notion that whiteness throughout history deserved to be judged positively. It looks like that sun's going to come up in a different way. I'm going to try to twist us around here just a little. Since I can see the halo, it's telling me that I'm going to miss it. There we go. Nothing happened, baby boy. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. Everything's okay. I just had to move. All right, now we continue with this chapter. The Reverend Hosea Easton, born in 1799, of Hartford, Connecticut, had been born into an activist family with a quintessentially American mixed background, but of a sort of crevature had not been able to see. Easton's mother was of at least partial African ancestry, and his father, James, a veteran of the Revolutionary War, had descended from Wampanoag and Narragansett Indians. After the war, James Easton had prospered as an iron manufacturer in North Bridgewater, now Brockton, Massachusetts. With his complicated lineage, Hosea identified himself as colored, effectively suppressing the Indian ancestry, probably in the interest of achieving undisputed citizenship. Got a little note down here. Benjamin Roberts, leader of the struggle against segregation in Boston schools, was Hosea Easton's nephew and James Easton's grandson. Paul Couffet, the prosperous Afro-Indian seafaring merchant from New Bedford, married Mary Easton, one of James Easton's daughters. I'm glad we know that. So glad we didn't miss out on that. Okay, we continue. Page 122 here together. Well, good morning. Morning, pretty bird. All right, now I continue. That is my morning friend. Color lines were hardening in the first quarter of the 19th century in Massachusetts, with the result that the Easton family found itself rejected from the public sphere. After a long spirited dispiriting, and losing protest against enforcement of racial segregation in their local schools and church, James Easton opened a school for colored youth in the mid-1810s. What is it, Pumpkin? What is it? You're okay. He's okay. He's okay. Becoming a minister and following in his father's activist footsteps, Hosea Easton attended the first meeting of the National Convention of Free People of Color in Philadelphia in 1831. When he was 32, times were harsh for people of color, and a mob of angry white supremacists attacked Easton's parishioners and burned down his church in Hartford in 1836. Not one to back off, Easton issued his response the following year in the form of a treatise on the intellectual character and civil and political condition of the colored people of the United States and the prejudice exercised toward them, with a sermon on the duty of the church to them. That was like all of it. That was the name of his really long name. Citing ancient and current history, Easton's treatise echoes David Walker's appeal by comparing the history of Africa, starting with Ham and ancient Egypt, to Europe's from its roots in ancient Greece. A stout Afrocentrist, Easton maintains that black and brown ancient Egyptians taught the Greeks everything of value. Conversely, he considers European history one long saga of bloodletting, a particular irony since 19th century Europeans and white Americans loudly proclaimed themselves superior in civilization. All right, this is written smaller, so this must be some of what was written by Easton. Let's see. It is not a little remarkable that in the 19th century, a remnant of this same barbarous people should boast of their national superiority of intellect and of wisdom and religion, who in the 17th century crossed the Atlantic and practiced the same crime their barbarous ancestry had done in the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries, bringing with them the same boasted spirit of enterprise, and not unlike their fathers, staining their route with blood, as they have rolled along as a cloud of locusts toward the west. The late unholy war with the Indians and the wicked crusade against the peace of Mexico are striking illustrations of the nobleness of this race of people and the powers of their mind. Ouch. Well, I'm gonna have to say I like his writing a little bit better. Let's see if I can put this up here. There we go. Come on. Oh, sweet baby. There we go. Okay, 5.5 pages of grisly wrongs perpetrated by Europeans through the ages. Close. Here's what he says. Anyone who has the least conception of true greatness on comparing the two races by means of what history we have must decide in favor of the descendants of Ham. The Egyptians alone have done more to cultivate such improvements as comports to the happiness of mankind than all the descendants of Japhet put together. What white supremacists praise as the products of energy and enterprise, Easton describes as booty obtained. Here's some more of his writing. By the dint of war and the destruction of the vanquished, since the founding of London, AD 49, their whole career presents a motley mixture of barbarism and civilization, of fraud and philanthropy, of patriotism and avarice, of religion and bloodshed, and instead of their advanced state in science being attributable to a superior development of intellectual facilities, it is solely owing to their innate thirst for blood and plunder. In a slight concession, Easton connects civilization to white people, but only as an outcome of violence rather than of innate intelligence. White people are not smarter, they are meaner. Despite their pungency, neither Walker's appeal nor Easton's treatise on the intellectual character ever truly penetrated the public consciousness at home or in Europe during the 19th century. The visibility of Walker's appeal grew in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, but never approached the reputation of the champion of foreign analysts. All right, here we go. Democracy in America must hold a record as the most quoted French text in the United States. The Princeton University Library holds 31 English editions of the originally 2-volume work, published to great acclaim in 1835 and 1840. The reason for such popularity is not far to seek. Alexis de Tocqueville, born in 1805, not only approved of the United States, he possessed a lineage Americans prized in their visiting friends. Tocqueville's conventionally Catholic, conventionally conservative, aristocratic family lived in Normandy. As a young man, he rose in the legal service of King Charles X, prospering in Versailles until the king's abdication in the wake of 1830 July Revolution. Such upheaval at the top of French management threatened Tocqueville's future. So much so, it seemed a good moment for Tocqueville and a dear friend, Gustave de Beaumont, another aristocrat lawyer of progressive turn of mind, to take a sabbatical from France in the United States, ostensibly to study prison reform. In fact, Beaumont and Tocqueville did publish a report on prisons in 1833, but it was Tocqueville's subsequent study on the United States Democratic in America, which is Democracy in America, 1835, which made him famous. Alrighty, here we go. Democracy in America is seldom cited as part of any tradition of racial thought, for Tocqueville ascribes American behaviors to the whole of American society rather than to any racial trait. Society grows out of laws, governance, and economic opportunity. Finding an exceptional society in the United States, Tocqueville locates the source of this exceptionism in American democracy. While American religion plays a role in American life, democracy trumps it, setting the tone in spheres both private and public. Equality provides the key word. On his first page, Democracy in America mentions the equality of social conditions 3 times, and many of the following 800-plus pages elaborate that basic point. The opening statements in the hundreds more pages label the United States a country populated by white people, directly descended from the English. The phrase, the English race, appears repeatedly in headings and in the body of the text. In the conclusion to Volume 1, Tocqueville glimpses the whole future of the English race in the New World. Chapter 3 of Volume 2 bears the title, Why the Americans Show More Aptitude and Taste for General Ideas Than Their Forefathers, the English. Alrighty, now we got us a little side note here. The bottom of the page. Speaking of our German ancestors, the views of Tacitus and Germanic institutions in France, Tocqueville echoes the views of his protege, Gobineau. This idea of two desperate French races is usually ascribed to the class-minded extreme hereditarian historian Henry de Boulevilliers, born in 1658, born in Normandy, and therefore by some accounts a descendant of the Vikings. Boulonnevillers was an aristocrat of the most pronounced type, according to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica. He saw the aristocracy as the descendants of Franks from Germany, and the peasants the descendants of mongrel Gauls and Romans. Okay, fine. I will show you a picture of him. But the sun is coming up, so I don't want to miss that. This is what that man looked like. Tocqueville. In case you need to look him up. Alright, we're just a couple of pages away. Stay with me, babies. The American of democracy in America is primarily a Northerner, usually a New Englander, of British Puritan descent. If he lacks brilliance and bores his guest, it is because he concentrates on making money. But the American's heart is in the right place, right enough, at any rate, for him to be about building a country of certain future greatness. Tocqueville does not make a slavery... Okay, another drink. Hang on. These names. Names in so many languages. All right. Tocqueville does not make slavery a crucial theme of analysis, for the American, is a citizen of Massachusetts, a quintessentially free state. Therefore, he nestles his discussion of slavery in the chapter on race, admittedly a topic he prefers to leave to his friend Beaumont, and thereby minimizes one of the core issues in American politics and culture. Only after 370 pages in the Penguin Classic Edition does Tocqueville concede any racial heterogeneity to the United States, and with heterogeneity comes much unpleasantness. Following 100 pages entitled A Few Remarks on the Present-Day State and the Probable Future of the Three Races which live in the territory of the United States, contrast sharply with the rest of Volume 1. On the lower Mississippi River, Tocqueville and Beaumont encountered Indians on the Trail of Tears. These forced migrations, whose fearful evils are impossible to imagine. I have witnessed evils. Tocqueville admits a couple of paragraphs later, I would find it impossible to relate. And this is regarding the plight of Indians in the United States. Words practically failed Tocqueville. Here's a little side note. Early on, Tocqueville quickly mentions the pernicious influence of slavery in the United States, idleness, ignorance, pride, poverty, and indulgence, the weaknesses of white Southerners. Then moves on to the Americans he sees as typical Americans, New Englanders. As for black people, they seem less fated for extinction than Native Americans, but their situation is nevertheless dire. black people, enslaved or free, only constitute an unhappy remnant, a poor little wandering tribe, lost in the midst of an immense nation which owns all the land. Such an assessment seems strange, if not ridiculous, to the 21st century ear, since this poor little wandering tribe comprised more than 2 million people, more than 18% of the total population. Tocqueville very clearly realizes that slavery damages Southern white people, as well as the Southern economy. Because of slavery, Southern white people's customs and character compare poorly with those of other Americans. Echoing Crèvecoeur's and Jefferson, and Tocqueville complains, "From birth, the Southern American is invested with a kind of domestic dictatorship, and the first habit he learns is that of effortless domination, which turns the Southern American into a haughty, hasty, irascible, violent man, passionate in his desires and irritated by obstacles. But he is easily discouraged if he fails to succeed at his first attempt. While impatience robs Southerners of the determination necessary to succeed, energy constitutes the American's great talent. He goes about taming the wilderness and wrenching riches from the land, not the Southerner. The Southerner loves grandeur, luxury, reputation, excitement, pleasure, and above all, idleness. Nothing constrains him to work hard for his livelihood, and as he has no work which he has to do, he sleeps his time away, not even attempting anything useful." Well, the severity of discrimination against African Americans alarms Tocqueville, prompting his prediction of an inevitable war of the races that will entail great misfortunes. If America ever experiences great revolutions, they will be instigated by the presence of blacks on American soil. That is to say, it will not be the equality of social conditions, but rather their inequality which gives rise to them. While the danger of revolution presses imminently in the South, the North enjoys no exemption. The specter of race war constantly haunts the imaginations of all Americans like a nightmare. But Tocqueville leaves his fears with that. Pursuing this line of thought would distort his egalitarian image of the United States. In truth, Tocqueville does not know what to do with the problem of slavery, or how to integrate the South into his depiction of the United States. Revolutions do not arise on a level playing field, and he needs a level playing field to justify his sunny democratic analysis. He solves his conundrum by cutting the South, slavery, and black people out of his theory, admitting in a footnote in Volume 2 that only Americans living in the free states conform to his image of a democratic, egalitarian society. The Ohio River offers a convenient dividing line. In Ohio, the American, driven to succeed, achieves through ingenuity. South of the Ohio River in slaveholding Kentucky, the Southerners disdains labor. Living in a relaxed idleness, he has the tastes of idle men. Money has lost a part of its value in his eyes. He is less interested in wealth than excitement and pleasure. Slavery, therefore, not merely prevents the whites from making money, but even diverts them from any desire to do so. Northerners own the ships that ply the nation's rivers and seas, the factories that produce untold wealth, the railroads that deliver produce to market, and canals that link the continent's great natural waterways. Only the North possesses these symbols of America. This long and tortured chapter seldom figures into the broadcast image of Tocqueville's United States. Little read and less often heeded. Little read and less often heeded. It has even been omitted from abridged editions. Whether or not literally cleansed of anything pertaining to race war and the general American nastiness surrounding questions of race, Tocqueville's America does not face all its racial facts. As he finally walks away from the topic of multiracial America, Tocqueville excuses the brevity of his own discussion by sending readers along to the novel of his friend Beaumont. All right, got a little note down here before I start on Gustave Beaumont. Like I said, we got just a couple pages left. Side note at the bottom of the page. Margaret Cohn notes that many scholars either remain silent on Tocqueville's commentary regarding slavery and race, or criticize him for evasion. Tocqueville's own strategies corroborate the latter charge. The first and more famous volume of Democracy in America leads off with equality and relegates the discussion of three American races to the end of the book. Tocqueville admits that slavery and Southern society belie his generalizations about the United States in footnotes, and decides, though in his text he faults the South for sluggishness and laziness, he refers his readers to Beaumont's work rather than integrating the multiracial theme into his analysis. Thomas Bender's fond introduction to Democracy in America concedes Tocqueville's avoidance of the fact of internal conflict in the United States and agrees with others who see Tocqueville as a prominent source for consensus thinkers such as Marvin Myers and Louis Hartz. And now we know. All right, we continue with Gustave de Beaumont, which is Tocqueville's friend. Gustave de Beaumont, born in 1802, lived through 66. Tocqueville's fellow lawyer and roommate in Versailles in the 1820s, his traveling companion and his lifelong friend, his biographer and literary executor, accompanied him in travels across the United States and Ireland in 1835. We got a picture of him. Beaumont, not so theory-driven, took more interest than Tocqueville in slavery and the conventions of racial identity. His sociological novel, Marie aux l'Esclavage, Marie or Slavery in the United States, a picture of American manners, in fact, made slavery an integral rather than an incidental facet of American society. Marie appeared in 2 volumes in 1835, the same year as the first volume of Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Both books won the Prix Montyon of the Académie Française, and both authors were elected members of the Académie des Sciences Morales et Politiques. But only Tocqueville was eventually inducted into the far more prestigious Académie Française after an assiduous campaign for acceptance. Ooh, we used to like the words, didn't we? Whew. My face hurts. In his novel, Beaumont's protagonists are Ludwig, a French immigrant to the United States, and his beloved American Marie, the daughter of parents who both look white, a Bostonian father and a mother who grew up in New Orleans. According to American Moors, Beaumont says the father really is white, the mother is not. Marie's Louisianan mother, whose great-grandmother was a mulatto, transmits to Marie the invisible taint of black blood. Although Marie's imperceptible mixed ancestry does not dissuade her French suitor Ludwig. Americans' one-drop rule makes her black, even in the so-called free North. Marie's drop of blackness marks her marriage to the Frenchman as a miscegenation. My Lord. An infraction sufficient to inspire a riot in New York City. Beaumont does not use the word miscegenation. It was only coined in 1864. And this is all happening in 1835-ish. The marriage cannot proceed. Ludwig and Marie seek peace in the wilds of Michigan, but before they can settle down, Marie dies. Ludwig remains an exile in the wilderness. Despite his novel's grim message, Beaumont evinces a sly sense of humor. In the foreword to Marie, he relates an anecdote illustrating Americans' preposterous racial rules. Although the theater was actually in New Orleans, Beaumont relates the incident as though taking place in Philadelphia. The first time I attended a theater in the United States in October of 1831, I was surprised at the careful distinction made between the white spectators and the audience whose faces were black. In the first balcony were whites, in the second mulattoes, in the third Negroes. An American beside whom I was sitting informed me that the dignity of white blood demanded these classifications. However, my eyes being drawn to the balcony, where sat the mulattoes, I perceived a young woman of dazzling beauty, whose complexion, of perfect whiteness, proclaimed the purest European blood. Entering into all the prejudices of my neighbor, I asked him how a woman of English origin could be so lacking in shame as to seat herself among the Africans. "That woman," he replied, "is colored." "What? Colored? She is whiter than a lily." "She is colored," he repeated coldly. "Local tradition has established her ancestry, and everyone knows that she had a mulatto among her forebears." He pronounced these words without further explanation, as one who states a fact that needs only be voiced to be understood. At the same moment I made out in the balcony for whites a face which was very dark. I asked for an explanation of this new phenomenon, and the American answered, "The lady who has attracted your attention is white." "What? White?" "She is the same color as the mulattoes." "She is white," he replied. "Local tradition affirms that the blood which flows in her veins is Spanish." Following the anecdote, Beaumont explains the deadly meaning of race prejudice in the United States, echoing Crèvecoeur and Jefferson. He concludes that white supremacy in America corrupts white people by schooling them in domination and tyranny, while blasting Negro faith and engendering in them violent hatreds and resentments bound to provoke bloody crisis. Although as much an aristocrat as Tocqueville, Beaumont deeply disagrees with his friend over the nature of U.S. society. Tocqueville, it seems, can only see a virtuous democracy, where Beaumont focuses on barriers as impassable as Europe's. White Americans, Beaumont concludes, belong to a hereditary aristocracy by dint of a mythology driven by the notion of tainted blood and a belief in invisible ancestry. Whoa, let's do this again. Okay, let me get a drink. Do that again. Feel like I didn't hear that. try that again. Although, as much an aristocrat as Tocqueville, Beaumont deeply disagrees with his friend over the nature of U.S. society. Tocqueville, it seems, can only see a virtuous democracy where Beaumont focuses on barriers as impassable as Europe's. White Americans, Beaumont concludes, belong to a hereditary aristocracy by dint of a mythology driven by the notion of tainted blood and a belief in invisible ancestry. This fact alone suffices to destroy the possibility of a true democracy. David Walker's indictment of hypocrisy reappears. Beaumont's mouthpiece, Ludwig, instructs a young traveler from France who is drawn to the United States by the laws and customs of this country. They are liberal and generous. Every man's rights are protected here. Not so, advised Ludwig, who, having lived with a family of color, knows that such impressions are mere illusions and chimeras. This is the last paragraph of this chapter. These two seminal books, very much two sides of the same coin, experienced contrasting fates in translation. Democracy in America was translated into English immediately upon publication in 1835, but Marie had to wait 123 years until 1958 for its first English translation. An accessible paperback in English did not appear anywhere for 164 years. When published in 1999 by the Johns Hopkins University Press, one fact, a title change, says much about the elevation of Tocqueville at the expense of Beaumont in 1938. George Wilson Pearson published Tocqueville and Beaumont in America, a scholarly analysis based on their notebooks and letters. When Johns Hopkins University Press republished Pearson's book in 1996, its contents unaltered, Beaumont had disappeared from the title, now simply Tocqueville in America. Thus quietly but definitely, Beaumont and his troubled multiracial United States ceded place to Tocqueville's egalitarian, democratic, white male America. Walker, Easton, and Beaumont, each in his own way, cast a wary eye on the myth of American democracy. Concurrently, another story was playing in the history of American whiteness. All right. And we did it. We finished chapter 8 together. And we caught another sunrise. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you.